Stray is a game I've been following ever since it was shown off at the PlayStation 5 reveal livestream in June of 2020. It's a cyberpunk game where you play as a cat. What more could you need? It finally released 2 years later, and it's even better than I expected. I have to admit that before playing the game, I was worried that it would be too gimmicky and not enough of a full experience. Luckily, Stray does not rely purely on the fact that you play as a cat to draw you in, but rather it crafts a beautiful and well thought out world and story where you just happen to play as a cat. In today's video, I'm going to give a gameplay breakdown and review of the full game. As with most Unreal Engine games, Stray is gorgeous. The dark nightscapes of the streets of the slums and Midtown are perfectly crafted, making the city feel like a real, lived-in place. It seems like every building and room is intricately detailed, even if it isn't relevant to the story. It's clear that a lot of passion went into creating all of these locations, from the sewers to the slums to the city centre. Lighting is especially great. The city is filled with bright neon lights, adding to its cold, urban cyberpunk beauty. This is complemented extremely well by the sound design and soundtrack, which are incredibly well done and add to the sci-fi feel. My main criticism of the experience is that the controls on PC are a little clunky. The game is very clearly designed for console first, and it even tells you this when booting. In addition, the physics engine can also sometimes act up a little. But small criticisms aside, the different areas are beautifully crafted and feel realistic. There are a lot of places you can go that don't really serve much purpose, which sometimes makes areas feel overwhelming. The game gives you very few hints, which obviously adds to the detective style, but it would be nice to have a map or something similar to help you find your way around sometimes. Anyways, with some basic thoughts out of the way, let's get into the game itself. Stray opens on a rainy day inside of a vast concrete wall. 4 cats stand watching the rain as the camera pans out to reveal the cat that you play as. You can walk up to each of the other cats and interact with them, which gives us a first look at just how detailed and realistic the cat is. It's immediately obvious just how much effort went into making the cat as real as possible, and that only becomes clearer as the game progresses. Once you've interacted with all of the other cats, all of them go to sleep and we cut to the next day. The cats venture through these strange concrete structures, running, jumping, and carefully making their way across various thin pipes. To add yet another detail to the cat, you can come across a puddle that you can drink from. There are various places across the game where you can drink, and while it doesn't actually do anything, I find that this adds a lot of character to the cat that you play as. The serenity of this section doesn't last long, however, as when you attempt to jump over this broken pipe, the cat misses the jump and falls down into the darkness below. When the cat wakes up, it's in a dark, damp sewer and walking with a limp. The screen fades to black, and when you reawake, you can make your way out of the sewer into the city streets. As you progress through this area, it becomes clear that you're being watched, and not only that, but whoever is watching you is trying to direct you towards somewhere. One of my favourite little details here is these paint cans, which you can push off the scaffolding in classic cat fashion, which is later used as a way of gaining access to a building. And, upon entering the building, you discover one of the game's best features, being able to scratch almost every rug and wooden surface you come across, once again adding a ton of impressive realism to the cat. Later on, as you continue to venture through the city, you run into the game's main enemies, the Zurks. You don't learn their name until later on, but for now all you need to know is that they're really fucking annoying, and running away from them is generally a good idea. game revolves around a lot of puzzle solving elements, and one example is these two fans that you have to stop at different points. The first can be stopped by throwing a bucket into it to jam the blades. The second can be stopped by simply unplugging the power. Eventually, after following all of the various directions, you find yourself inside a house, faced by a giant computer screen. This is another one of my favourite small details in the game, where walking across the keyboard will type random nonsense into the console. Whoever is talking through the computer appears to be some sort of AI, who asks you to find a body to download them into. A door opens to some sort of lab room. In here, you'll have to find 4 batteries to power up the system that will allow you to transfer the AI consciousness into the drone body you find in another room. This is B12, a small drone who will become your companion for the game's duration, and it's through him that you'll be able to communicate with the city's robot inhabitants. And when you aren't using him, he stores himself in this backpack, something the cat initially objects to a lot. Another small detail that I love. In order to exit the apartment, you have to find a code for the door. This is an incredibly easy puzzle as it's written on the wall in the storage cupboard, but it's a style of puzzle that reappears a couple of times later in the game. After leaving, you continue your journey through the city, jumping obstacles and avoiding zergs. On the way, you come across a mural of a beach, with a postcard of the same painting attached. This is the first of the core memories. Each chapter has several of these memories to find, which serve as the game's main unlockables, and also gives you more lore and backstory on the city. The core memories are the main memories that you need to progress, and are shown along the top in orange. Anyways, this postcard will be important later, but moving back to the story, it's not long until you reach the next chapter, the slums. At the beginning of the next chapter, we see one of the companion robots to populate the city for the first time, but as soon as they see the cat, they run away in fear, activating an alarm as they flee. As you venture deeper into the street, we see more robots hiding in fear before we reach the giant elevator in the center. Here we meet the Guardian, the leader of the slums, who explains that the reason for the robots' fear was because they thought that the cat was a Zerg. This is the first time that we actually learn the name of the Zergs. Upon showing the postcard to the Guardian, he says that there are a group of robots who claim to have come from outside the city walls, but all of them had disappeared except for one, Momo, who he suggests you show the postcard to. If we want to escape the city, Momo is the best lead we have. From here, the slums become a sort of hub area in this section of the game. There are various extra things to do, from collecting all of the music sheets, to meeting all of the various characters and collecting memories, which serve as the main form of collectibles throughout the game. The music sheets I mentioned earlier are a really cool little extra in this section, and you can give them to Marusk. I don't actually know how you pronounce this guy's name, to be honest. A robot with a strange tin can guitar, and he'll play them as you sit beside him. Once you visit Momo, he seems initially very reluctant to help you, but upon presenting him with any of the 4 notebooks from around the slums, he becomes a little more enthused. Eventually, when he found all 4, he agrees to help you. One of the notebooks gives directions on how to fix the transmitter and contact the outsiders, creating the main focus for the next section of the game. Before we leave, I just want to talk about how amazing the slums are. This whole area feels so full of life and colour, with the sheer amount of detail put into each street and building being off the charts. I keep saying this, but the whole city feels so real and alive thanks to just how much work was put into every little detail. You can find a multitude of robots living in each of these places that may not even have much relevance to the story, but are just there to add character and realism to this dystopian environment. The next level is called Rooftops and takes place in a giant area of the slums that has become infested by Zergs. Your only goal here is to reach the top of a giant tower and install Momo's transmitter. You have to carefully weave your way around the Zergs, getting to areas they can't reach and sometimes even trapping them behind electric gates that could be hacked by B12. The pressure from the onslaught of Zergs means that quick thinking and on-the-spot puzzle solving is a necessity here. An interesting detail that you can learn whilst in the tower is that the Zergs were originally created by humans to eat waste, but have evolved into an all-consuming bacteria. Once you reach the top of the tower, you can call an elevator to get to the antenna, but you haven't escaped the Zergs yet as they begin to descend the sides of the building, chasing you all the way to the elevator. Once the transmitter is installed, there's only one thing to do, which is return to Momo and try to contact the other outsiders. Upon returning to the slums, you meet with Momo in the bar as he attempts to make contact with his friends. Eventually, a giant robotic face appears on the screen. You soon discover that this is Zabaltazar. Once again, no fucking clue how to pronounce half the names in this game. Anyway, this isn't the first time Zabaltazar's come up as you collected his notebook earlier in the Slums Pt.1. Zabaltazar tells you that he and the other outsiders are safe and that you'll have to go through the sewers to reach them. After Zabaltazar disconnects, Momo looks to a robot sitting at the bar. This guy, named Seamus, tells you that going into the sewers is a stupid idea, due to the number of Zergs. Seamus is the son of Doc, another of Momo's friends, but due to the disappearance of his father many years ago, it's unlikely he's going to want to help you out. But hey, it's worth a shot. Upon following him to his apartment, you can sneak in and search for clues to prove that his father isn't dead. This game is a lot of things, but what it does best is these more detective-based sections, where you have to find specific items and hidden codes to solve puzzles. And if you saw my last video, you know just how much I love puzzle games. The puzzle in this section is one of my favourites in the game. You find a hidden keypad, but you don't know the code. But behind a picture frame, you can find a hint to what it might be. Time will tell. You may have already noticed something strange about this room. There's 4 clocks on the wall, each showing a slightly different time. By taking the 4 numbers that each of the minute hands are showing, you get the combination for the keypad. I love puzzles like this that use clues hidden within the environment. It adds a level of realism to the puzzle solving and detective elements of the game, rather than just using regular puzzles that would break the level of immersion you have in the game's world. The keypad opens an entrance to a secret room, where you find both the blueprints for Doc's anti-Zerg weapon and a tracker that will hopefully lead you to his location. The next section involves going to Elliot, the tech repairman, to get the tracker fixed, but he can't fix it due to his hypochondria. You have to go to Grandma, the knitter, to make him a poncho. One thing I think this game does really well is having these semi-open environments like the slums, where small side quests help you in the main storyline. For example, getting Grandma to knit you a poncho is something you could have done right when you first got to the slums, by buying electric cable from the guy at the marketplace and taking it to her. Once all that's done, Elliot fixes the tracker and there's a signal. It's time to leave the slums once again. In the next chapter, Dead End, you traverse your way through the dangerous Zerg-infested area just outside of the slums. When you eventually reach Doc's supposed whereabouts, you find him in a small house, which you can access through an open window. This chapter serves pretty much one function, to give you the defluxer and teach you how to use it. The defluxer is your main weapon against Zergs. On PC, holding down the left mouse button activates it. It creates a large circle of purple light on the ground, which kills any Zergs within its radius. Using the defluxer for too long makes it overheat, however, so you have to pay attention to this bar before. It's not too dissimilar to the weapon system in Battlefront 2. Did you see that callback? Don't even try to say this isn't the highest quality content, because I'm bringing that next level continuity. At the end of the chapter, you return to the slums and Doc and Seamus are reunited. This is the last time you'll see the slums before you continue your journey to the top, so any side missions or other quests that you want to complete, you'll have to do now. But before you can go up, you have to go down and venture into the sewers, the home of the Zergs. The sewers is one of my favourite chapters of the game, mainly because it has a completely different feel to everything up to this point, apart from maybe the rooftops. The tension and horror elements are turned up to the max here. You're going to be glad to have the defluxer because you'll be using it a lot. Because the sewer is actually the home of the Zergs, you'll be seeing these egg sacs everywhere. You're going to want to avoid them, because get too close and out pops a horde of Zerks. The better tactic is to get near a large group and use the defluxer. As you make your way slowly through the first areas of the sewers, it doesn't seem so bad, but eventually you get to a huge door blocking your path. You and Momo struggle to get it open, eventually succeeding, but only getting it open enough for the cat. Momo can go no further. You crawl under the door and it closes behind you. In a way, it might as well have been the gate to hell. Everything beyond this point feels weird and twisted, like being inside a giant living organism. And as you get further into the depths of this metaphorical hell, you'll find that that's exactly what it is, as the walls become covered with thousands of giant eyes constantly watching you. And when you reach the center, you're met with a giant eye seemingly 100 times bigger than the cat itself. And almost as soon as that happens, an onslaught of Zerks comes flooding in. The cat tries to fight them off but is knocked down, and B12 is forced to push the defluxer to its limits to destroy them. When you reawake, you pick up B12 and run. The Zerks are gone, but so is the defluxer. It's back to running and dodging now. I just love how the sewers managed to add so much tension and creepiness into a game that up until now has had a completely different feel. Every chapter manages to feel like it offers something new. One thing that's just as important to me as plot in all media, whether it's film, TV or games, is the style and vibes. And this game has that in bucket loads, from a cityscape like the slums to a dark, twisted environment like the sewers. Once you eventually escape the sewers, you arrive at the next hub area, Antvillage. Stray has two different types of chapters. Fast-paced, more mission-like chapters like the sewers and Dead End, and then hub areas like the slums and Antvillage, where you have a main objective but there's other small side quests and areas to explore. Antvillage is home to Zabaltazar, who you spoke to earlier on Momo's computer. As you enter the Antvillage, you're greeted with a strange pod, something that seems to trigger a memory in B12. He remembers how the scientist he lived with stepped into one of these pods, and he never saw him again. But then the true realization comes to him. B12 is the scientist. The pod transferred his consciousness into the network, and now into this drone body. The last human left in the city is your tiny drone companion. This news makes B12 shut down a little, and you're unable to interact with any of the villagers until you find Zabaltazar. Zabaltazar is an interesting character. A broken robot body connected by a multitude of cables to a giant bank of computer screens. Zabaltazar tells you that only one of the outsiders made it to Midtown, Clementine. If you want to get to the outside, she's your best bet. He gives you a photo of her that you can use to prove that he sent you when you reach Midtown. But before we talk about Midtown, let's talk about Antvillage itself. Design-wise, Antvillage is one of my favourite locations in the game. The idea of this small community constructed around a large sewer pipe is so inspired, and I just love its circular, vertical design. The side quests and interactions with robots they added in this area are pretty cool too. There's a gardener you can collect flowers for, and various robots to talk to with interesting dialogue. Anyways, enough exploring, it's time to finally make it to the game's final major area, Midtown. Climbing to the very top of the Antvillage, you reach the train station. Just a short walk up the stairs and you're finally in Midtown. Now, if Antvillage was one of my favourite locations in the game, Midtown is my favourite. This is how a cyberpunk city should look. Dark and mysterious, yet lit up by seemingly endless amounts of neon lights, screens and colours. A city that blends technology with everyday life in that classic dystopian manner. Your main objective is to find Clementine, but that's going to be no easy feat, as she's highly wanted by the Midtown police, who now serve as your main enemies in place of the Zerks. Much like the slums and Antvillage, Midtown is another open area with lots of places to explore and robots to interact with. There aren't really any side quests in Midtown though, as all of the small tasks you complete are necessary to progress the story. The first thing you'll have to do is find where Clementine lives, from her address on the back of the photo Zabaltazar gave you. You can show the photo to various people, eventually discovering that Clementine lives in the residency at the back of Midtown. When you get there though, there is a group of robots who ask if you can destroy the cameras in the apartment complex, and in exchange, they'll give you a mixtape. Destroying the cameras is pretty easy, you just have to jump on top of them, and they'll fall down as you walk away. Once they're all gone, you can get the mixtape, which will be useful later. The apartment building is also the place where Clementine lives, and you can get into her apartment through the small gap in the boarded window. Initially wary of you, Clementine realizes that you were sent by Sir Balthazar when you hand her the photo. Clementine explains to you that her plan to get to the outside is to use the subway, but to do this she needs a battery, which you will have to steal from the NicoCorp facility. The next section of Midtown is really well put together, as you have to complete a number of tasks in order to gain access to the factory. First, you meet with Clementine's contact, Blazer, who tells you to get a uniform so that he can gain access to the factory. You can get a high-vis jacket from the clothes shop by distracting the owner with the mixtape you got earlier. Then you have to get a hard hat from the hat shop. You can't do this until you find the worker who's meant to be stocking the hat shop, however, who you'll find asleep at the back of the bar and could wake up by pushing a crate of beers onto his head. Then, you simply head back to the hat shop, hop in a box, and get carried inside to steal the hard hat with ease. Once you've returned the two items to Blazer, the two of you can sneak into the plant, with the cat being hidden inside of a box again. The NicoCorp facility is where we're introduced to the Sentinels. A lot of the levels involving Sentinels remind me of Ratchet & Clank or some other classic PlayStation games. The mechanics are pretty simple. The Sentinels shoot out a beam of blue light in front of them. Walk into the beam and it turns red, and the Sentinel will try to kill you. Run away and the beam turns yellow as the Sentinel tries to look for you. Escape and it turns blue again. So in this level you have to make your way through the factory, sneaking past Sentinels however you can, whether that means hiding in boxes or using shadows to your advantage. Eventually you arrive at the battery, which involves another little puzzle to obtain. The capsule containing the battery requires 3 pressure pads to be activated at the same time in order to open it. You'll have to use this strange square robot and guide it to this gate in order to gain a second identical robot. Then you can place each of them on 2 of the 3 pads, and then the battery raises enough for you to push the barrel you use to gain access onto the 3rd plate, and finally obtain the battery. As soon as you take it, the facility erupts into a chorus of alarms, but luckily you can easily escape via this zipline. Things won't get easier from here however, as security is now tightened throughout Midtown. Getting back to Clementine is going to be a difficult task, but a fun one. I love the way Stray plays with mechanics. None of the types of challenges or tasks it presents you with feel repetitive or boring. When the game introduces a new mechanic, usually it's only used for that one level, and by the next chapter it's onto something new again. For example, the defluxer in Dead End and the sewers, or the more detective-like gameplay of both of the Slums chapters. For Midtown and the next chapter, it's the Sentinels. We got our first taste of how they work in the NicoCorp facility, but I think they're best implemented in this next level. The police have locked down the apartments, having discovered Clementine's location. The building is now swarmed with Sentinels, and you'll have to sneak past all of them to access Clementine's apartment. This introduces a need for strategy that hasn't really been present at all up until now. You'll have to remember the paths of each of the drones and find routes to get past them without being detected, whether that means walking along a thin beam across the middle courtyard or hiding in boxes around corners. Eventually you can get back inside the apartment, but Clementine is nowhere to be found, leaving only a note with 4 drawings of items that can be found around the apartment. And it's back to detective work once again. Each item you find has a piece of a message attached to it. When you find all 4, you have a full message which reads, "I'm with Blazer, come to the nightclub." The nightclub can be found in the main high street, but the bouncer refuses you access. To be fair, how many nightclubs do you know that allow cats? So, with the main entrance being a no-go, you'll have to find an alternative way to get in. Heading round to the back of the club, you'll find an open window on the top floor that you can jump up to and get straight onto the dance floor. As soon as you're inside, it's back to puzzle solving once again, as you'll have to figure out how to gain access to the VIP lounge where Clementine and Blazer are located. One robot you talk to has a stolen lever that he'll give to you if you get him a drink. You can easily steal a drink from the bar and return to exchange it for the lever. The lever is used to activate these holograms, which you'll need to use to gain access to the upper level. When you do manage to make it up, you'll gain access to a console that controls the positioning of the lights. You'll have to use the buttons to get them in an alignment that will allow you to jump to the VIP area. Once you do this, all you have to do is jump over and head through the doorway on your right. But when you get inside, Clementine is tied up to a chair. In walks Blazer. He betrayed you and turned both of you into the Sentinels. The screen fades to black, and when it comes back, you're in a cage, hanging from the ceiling in a strange, dingy room. B12 and Clementine are nowhere to be seen. The game's penultimate chapter will take place here, in the jail. This cage is a pretty simple challenge to overcome. You just have to run in a circle inside of it to swing it back and forth and bust it open against a nearby platform. From here, it's back to parkour and avoiding sentinels, in what proves to be yet another very thoughtfully designed location. If it wasn't clear already, the thing I appreciate most about this game is the incredible effort put into level design, and how each of the locations managed to feel unique, diverse, and interesting in their own ways. The prison, I find, really highlights the dystopian setting, with its crumbling walls, decaying robot prisoners, and endless hordes of sentinels. After sneaking your way past a multitude of sentinels, you finally make it to Clementine's cell. Of course, with B12 missing, you can't understand what she's trying to say to you, so she has to resort to pointing at the set of keys hanging in the office opposite. All you have to do is go into the office, grab the keys, and give them to Clementine so she can escape. Now it's back to sneaking around the prison until you come to where B12 is being held. Getting him out isn't going to be easy. He's surrounded by sentinels, lasers, and a giant force field-like cage. Gameplay-wise though, this is a great segment. There's lots of unique parkour and tight situations involving both sentinels and laser traps. Many of the lasers moved, so you'll often find yourself having to time jumps with both a laser and a sentinel's movement in mind. Your goal is to reach the power switch, which will deactivate B12's cell. With no room for much strategy, you'll have to try your best to run in and grab B12 and make it out alive, retracing your steps until you reach Clementine. Now that B12 is back, it's time to escape the prison for good. Eventually you make it out to this courtyard area. Here you'll have to anger sentinels so that they'll follow you into these cells where you can trap them. Scattered around the courtyard are a number of prisoners, most of them decaying or in disrepair. I love the world building that they add to this section, showing the corruption and disrepair that the city has fallen into after thousands of years being sealed away. Finally, you reach the control room for the prison's main gate, right next to a conveniently placed truck. You're going to have to act fast. As soon as that gate is opened, the sentinels will be alerted. Clementine backs the truck up against the fence so you can jump it, and you run into the control room to pull the lever. The gate begins opening immediately, and just as expected, the sentinels are immediately on your tail. With no time to waste, you'll have to use all the strength left in your little cat body to run and catch up with Clementine. Crashing through the streets of Midtown with the sentinels in hot pursuit, you finally make it back to the subway. But as you run inside, Clementine closes the gates behind you. She's going to buy you time by distracting the sentinels. You and B12 are alone again. Placing the battery in its slot, you can power up the train and begin your journey to your final destination, the control room. When you reach the end of the line, you're in a strangely pristine station, plastered with boards advertising the city itself. Gone is the disrepair of Midtown and the slums. This place seems almost alien. There's a robot cleaning the platform, but when you approach them, their response is automated. They have no conscience, no personality, a far cry from the diverse characters living in the other areas of the city. As you head up the stairs, there are yet more robots, once again all of them seemingly content in whatever task they're doing, giving the same automated response each time you interact with them. Heading up the last set of stairs, you're greeted with the giant red doors of the city, sealed as expected. The door to the control room itself is to be opened by both you and B12, enlisting the help of another of the square robots from earlier. Once inside, you're going to have to do a number of tasks and puzzles in order to hack the system and open the gates. The first of which is to turn on all of the computers in a series of large banks in the middle of the room. Next, you have to hack 3 terminals around the room. Or rather, B12 has to hack them, and you have to destroy their internals. Hacking the first terminal immediately activates the alarms. Of course, this isn't a big deal as there's no one around to stop you, but it means you're locked out of the system. Hacking the other 2 terminals should fix it though. Once the second terminal is finished, it's becoming clear that the power surges are taking a toll on B12, but you've got to push to complete the final one. The third one knocks out B12's body completely. You'll have to carry him to the station yourself to complete the process, but as you place him onto the interface, he reveals a secret to you. He knew that the power required to open the city would destroy him. You'll have to leave the city alone. What is it with me and reviewing games that end in the death of a robot whose name begins with B? B12 uploads himself to the system. His broken body falls to the floor, and the cat lays itself to rest next to him. As we pan away, we see the city opening. The Zerks burst as they try to escape, as the whole city becomes bathed in sunlight. We see once again each of the friends we met along the way, as they look to the sky for the first time in their lives. When you reawake, B12 is still next to you. You can hop on top of the console and watch the city as it continues to open. I love this little section, giving you this overview of the whole city and all of the areas you've been previously. The slums, the tower, Midtown, the prison, all seem so tiny from so far up above. Finally, you can exit the control room and leave the city gates, finally returning to the fresh air of the outside. Right before we fade to black though, we see a tiny flicker on one of the screens by the wall. Maybe B12 really did survive, and that's the end. Stray is an absolute triumph. From a game I expected to be a fun gimmick, to a genuine story about friendship, camaraderie, dystopia, and corruption. Gameplay feels smooth and well designed throughout, but most importantly, the city itself is a perfect location, a unique and interesting vision of a cyberpunk future populated by sentient robots. It's incredible how much was achieved in this game without a single line of spoken dialogue and no human characters. Stray is no crazy masterpiece, nor does it try to reinvent the wheel. Instead, it takes simple, well-known game concepts and implements them in the best way possible, to create a simple, fun, and engaging experience that only takes around 4 to 6 hours to complete. And fuck it, the cat's cute as hell. At the end of the game, I'm left wanting to know more about the world. What does the world outside of the city look like? What was the city like when the humans were alive? How many of these cities were built? All of these questions I have are a testament to the excellent world that Blue 12 built. Not only that, but they managed to make the cat an incredibly compelling character, with levels of realism I could never have anticipated. It's nice to see for once that a game I'm excited for truly lived up to the hype, but not only that, completely broke through the hype and exceeded my expectations. Well, that's the end. This was a pretty different style of video for me, and I'm not sure if it's something I plan on doing again. I'm sorry this video took so long to complete, but that was mainly due to external factors and not just laziness. Anyways, the next video hopefully shouldn't be quite as delayed and is going to be a more normal review. Other than that, if you aren't already subscribed, please do consider doing that, and like the video if you enjoyed. Dislike if you don't, I guess, but that doesn't really do anything anymore. Other than that, hope you enjoyed, thank you, and goodbye.